he got transported to 2040. Poor Cristiano is like, you bump into Paul and Paul's just celebrating. He's like, man, we've done it. It's happened. Alignment is soul. Like, and you look out and, the light cone is smiling and joyous.
That's so wide.
Yeah. It's like, wow, what happened? Also, is this, because I just kind of keep up to meme and I'm like interviewing. But like, I don't know, what
off the channel.
What am I doing? Is this recorded for? Could be. Okay. Half meme, half
off takes.
Off takes. So you have like inside your second channel where you just yeah.
The outside view.
I often find it slightly confusing how LLMs translate to some system might come out in the future. In some sense, it feels like, you ask a large language model, like, oh, do you want to break out with a server and like take over? And it goes, yes. I'm not actually sure what this translates to for like a future system that's actually taking over breaking servers. Like I can imagine these systems are maybe more like maybe end-to-end, like maybe like something like an action transformer, or they're not directly trained in the language. And it's unclear to me like how what they say translate to what they do. And in fact, I'd expect that to diverge pretty heavily in cases I'd worry about.
Yeah, I think we're in a really weird situation right now because we have all these models and there's this sense that like they could really do things that like change things in the world, right? But nobody's really deployed these models into like a convincing enough context to showcase these capabilities. But to answer your question, I think like, things like WebGPT or like with Cohere with Act 1, like once you give language models an API, I think the idea is that like they can leverage the knowledge they've gained in pre-training to use this API to do dangerous things.
And you imagine that like, something like ACT. I mean, ACT can't generate language, at least not directly. Do you see like what it says its actions are when asked in language translate well and generalize like what its actions actually will be? Like let's say you have WebGPT. Oh, would you break out the server farm? Do you think whether it says yes or no in like an email like this translates to if I scale up the system, if I deploy it, actually will? And right. I feel like there might be some disconnect between what this like chatbot says and then what happens when you use this thing's world model, fine tune it on some actions, cause it to run, let's say interact lots with an API. It feels that like the emergent behavior there happens kind of independently of what it said in the chatbot setting.
Yeah, I agree. So I don't think you literally go and ask it, would you break out of the server farm? But you go in and measure, like literally just have humans maybe at first look at the actions it's taking and see, okay, I am like an expert software engineer or an expert systems engineer. Like I'm looking at these actions. Do these actions look as if like the model is actually trying to break out of the server farm? So yeah, I suppose like that's a problem with evaluations where you just ask the language model like yes or no questions about what it would do and not actually like see what it would do.
So like let's say hypothetically you had to set up some kind of eval company. Hypothetically, let's say there was some kind of eval company that was going on. It's like I think I'd be interested to see like right now what would your model of like what would that eval look like? Is it more like you said, give it an API, see what it's saying?
Yeah, API, I think also identifying key contexts in which a dangerous behavior like takeover or some sort of power seeking would occur. Yes, so the difficulty here, I think we need to identify these contexts in order to actually be able to write concrete evals and to provide evidence that's convincing to the public that AIs could do dangerous things. Of course, I don't think like we're going to be able to cover all the possible ground. There's, of course, some uncertainty in extrapolating from evaluations that we develop. Okay, the AI does something dangerous in this scenario, doesn't do something dangerous in like scenario B. What does it do in scenario C? Sort of unclear.
Do you worry about like at the point where an AI can exhibit dangerous behavior, it's already strategically aware that if it had, like let's say, someone like Yukowski or like let's say Evan is right, like strategic awareness plus like long-term planning often leads to deception, that your evals will be too late in some sense. Like there's this like, you have to catch it while it's still competent enough to show dangerous behavior and not competent to have the strategic awareness that it should be deceptive.
Yeah, that's a serious problem, I think. Yeah, so one, I think definitely people should be looking into the conditions under which deceptive alignment or something like that might arise. Number two, this is just an argument for developing evals as fast as possible, so that, I'm imagining at every stage of the training process, like ideally, every like 10 steps or something, maybe even like every step, we literally just like eval the hell out of this thing, right? We make sure not to train on this eval somehow. Somehow we need to make sure our evals don't ever make it into the training sets of language models. Otherwise, while they train on this, they already know about this. It's going to be kind of useless.
So, yeah, how do you feel about this like optimization? And so, I think you previously mentioned you don't like the word benchmark and you used the word eval. Could you maybe expand on that?
Yeah, so I don't think I like the word benchmark because I think historically machine learning, benchmark has been associated with this idea that, okay, we are like optimizing for this thing. But this thing that we're developing, this eval, at the end of the day is just a proxy measure for what we care about, which is, it might be specifically like corrigibility, it might be honesty. Maybe we're trying to make sure this AI doesn't like, it isn't able to like manipulate a lot of people, right? So it's like an imperfect measure. I think when you optimize for an imperfect measure, I mean, I think this is like common, already known in the ICH, like you don't tend to get models that actually do what you care about at the end of the day. So I think like the framing of evals instead of benchmarks to me makes it clear in my head at least that we don't want to be optimizing for these things. We're just using these as sort of like checks on our model, right? But there's another difficulty with having like, I guess, public evals, and that there's some sort of like implicit optimization already going on, right? Like when researcher A like tries a technique on like some benchmark or eval and finds it doesn't work and publishes a paper, researcher B says, oh, you tried this technique, it doesn't work, I'm going to try another technique. So that researchers are already going through an optimization process to make evals better. And I think like this optimization process is like maybe like a little weaker than actually like fitting on the test set, for instance, which happens sometimes. But it is still an optimization process. Yeah, there's like some work actually that studies, how effective is this like implicit optimization process? Really? I don't quite remember the details right now, but like, the general consensus is that you actually do need to keep updating your evals and benchmarks because there's an optimization process. I mean, on ImageNet, right? Like we're already like so good at ImageNet. The next like 0.2%, is that really like a better model, or is that really just like overfitting to what ImageNet, is, overfitting to like random stuff in ImageNet?
Yeah, I remember there was this paper maybe a few years ago where they regathered an ImageNet type data set. And they did find that, at least back then, so it was out of distribution. They did the same thing. They gathered a bunch of images online, like the same, and like there's been some distribution shift. So models would perform worse on this new ImageNet, but the ranking between models was still kept. At least that paper claimed that back then you hadn't yet overfit. Yeah, I think I find it hard to imagine publishing such an evaluation and not having the headline be my model passes all the evaluations, right? And I guess if you're like, if you feel like, so if you make a model pass all the evals, do you see this as then a good thing?
So I think my perspective is a model passing evals shouldn't be taken as evidence of safety, but a model failing eval is evidence that, okay, let's slow things down, maybe not release it. Let's talk to some people.
So failing evals is sufficient to show danger, but not necessary.
Maybe not in a truth, like strictly truth sense, but in a practically speaking what we should do sense. In the sense that like, I think I am fairly risk averse about like, releasing AIs into the world.
So how much of this eval plan rests? Like how do you see the technical side, like making good evals? And I guess the more like social governance side of like getting people to pay attention to these evals. Like how does either play look for you? Where do you think more work is needed? What does that trade-off look like for you personally and what you want to work on?
Yeah, so I think this depends on timelines and where we're at. So I think it also depends on things I'm not like totally aware of. So one thing is, if you actually went to the heads of Google Brain and Anthropic and like all the big tech companies, right? And you actually told them, look, like we have this dangerous evaluation. we're running it on your models do terrible, terrible things. If you show this to them, would they actually like refrain from releasing models? I'm not sure what would be convincing to those people, right? At another level, okay, even supposing that it's convincing to those people, for how long is it going to be convincing? It doesn't seem like a sustainable thing to rely on, like, in some sense, the goodwill of these people who might have different aims than, like, people in AI safety, regarding, like, not ending the world, right? So I think that's the next level. Like, that's the level at which we try to bring in other people from the public, like civil society, governments, just in general, like public consensus building around like the idea that like AIs can like just empower us, right? So yeah, I think like, an eval is kind of useless if nobody pays attention to it or if people don't find it convincing, in particular the people who have the power to actually do things. So part of the work, I think, is thinking about what kinds of evals would actually be convincing to people.
What do you think? What kind of evals do you think, at least current, as you stand?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of have no idea. Like, I mean, I have an idea of evals that would be convincing to me. Like, if I actually saw an AI like trying to copy its weights to another server, trying to like get a lot of money. Yeah, like I buy I buy that, right? Like if I was at a deep mind, I'd be like, okay, maybe even without looking at these evals, let's like slow it down a little bit. But like like I think there's just like big gap between people in like AI safety or existential safety and people in other communities that also care about the impact of AI in society, like people in fate, like fairness, accountability, transparency, and ethics. People generally in like AI ethics. Yeah, so, there's already a big difficulty in just explaining, like, what is the danger here, right? Like, I think there's this big discourse outside of the AI safety community, the idea that, like, AIs are just tools, they aren't agents. Like, what's so hard, The difficulty is misuse, or in some sense, like, this lack of coordination between everybody, and, like, making things go bad, and, like, AIs that, like, exacerbate, like, bad things that we have today, like oppression. I think these are all true, right? But I think like, the danger of AIs as agents is this like separate category that's been very, very difficult to explain to other people for some reason. So like, yeah, like I'm not sure what kind of evals would be convincing to them. Like maybe there needs to be much more consensus building, on a philosophical basis of like, what are the things in common between what the things that like people in X safety care about and the things that people in fate care about.
Do you think that this is like where do you think the disagreement lies? Like, is it like a technical one, more philosophical one? Like, if you try to characterize why these people don't really worry about AI doom like we seem to.
Yeah, I mean, it's something I'm still trying to figure out and writing a document about. Yeah, so first I think, like, I guess I would consider myself in, like, both of these camps. Like, I think, like, existential safety is super important. But, I mean, I also think, like, fairness problems are, like, also super important. Like, on any given day, I wake up and I'm like, okay, got to be at least 30%, deontologist.
As we find out of recent events, the deontologist,
right? Yeah, no, I know. I think justice is really important. Like, I don't want to live in a world where, we have, like, just like our current systems of discrimination just like enforced or solidified because of really, really good artificial intelligence. This seems like a concern to me that is like, yeah, I guess I find difficulty maybe like giving a absolutely precise like rating scale for how important things are. I guess in general, I try to find commonalities between causes I really care about. To sort of do things that seem robustly good on both accounts. So yeah, and I think like, my work in evals so far is like an attempt to doing this. What was your question?
Sorry, my original question was, where do you see, like, I guess my question is, why don't people care about X-risk? Or let's say even more broadly, what do you think stops the average Mila PhD from being like, shit, man, let me write some alarming forum posts right now. Okay, let's not say like let's say like care about X-risk.
Yeah, I think there are a bunch of possible reasons. I'm kind of not sure which ones are the most plausible. I think I just have to like talk to more people. One of them is, AI is like taking over the world. It's actually some wild shit, right? Like you like stroll up to somebody on the street and you're like, in 5 years, they're going to be dead. No, like, you'd be like taken in, right? So I think firstly, we should have to recognize like, yeah, this is actually wild, right? Like if, like you finish high school or university, like you go straight to work, you don't really think about, or like you're not really exposed to all the developments that have been happening in artificial intelligence. Is busy with like your life, right? Your job, family, stuff like that. This is like totally out of left field. So I think we have to acknowledge that and like try to explain things in a way that like are more relatable to a greater extent than we have so far. I think another thing is like this is definitely not true of like all people in AI safety, but there is almost this vibe that like, besides existential risk, like technology. Yes. So maybe what I'm trying to say is like the association that is in people's minds between the people who are in AI safety and the people in Silicon Valley. So I think like there is this vibe from people in Silicon Valley that like technology is like generally a good thing and that it's going to solve social problems. I think this is in contrast to a lot of people's opinions in like the fake community who like, yeah, maybe they're not like techno pessimists, but they're definitely a lot more pessimistic about technology than people in Silicon Valley, just looking at the history of ways in which technology has been misused and has been used to like discriminate against people more. And I think the people in the fake community, they look at like the use of AI in like society today, like the increasing use of algorithms in places like loan applications or like job applications, right? And they say, oh, like clearly these technologies are just reproducing harms that we've already had, right? So that might be this like sort of their starting mindset. And it might be hard to like convince them otherwise that there is like actually another harm as well. The things you're talking about, they actually do happen and we should try to fix them. But there's this like related harm that we should also try to solve.
How much of it do you think is, in the spirit of the Inside You podcast, how much do you think it is timelines, belief about the speed of progress?
Part of it. So a lot of people, I think, in the fake community don't think that AIs could be like, classical RL agents pursuing goals in ways that misgeneralize to new environments. Yeah, I'm not even sure that like a lot of people really know about reinforcement learning. Yeah, like I've had a ton of conversations where, I like people express to me, oh, like AIs are just tools, like we're just designing them, like, they're really just like reproducing the data, right? And I'm like, well, like, have you heard of reinforcement learning? Like we're literally designing agents to maximize like a reward function, right? This is like all the problems of classical utilitarianism. They're like, oh shit, I've never heard of this, right? So part of it might just be education that like, literally there are like companies and research labs in academia whose goal is to build artificial general intelligence with something like reinforcement learning. And like, they're just doing this. The vast majority of people aren't thinking about safety concerns. So I don't know, maybe like telling people this might help.
So it sounds like there's some underlying thing there where, like let's say I or like people in the extras community think of AI and they think of like some agentic, like, maximizing reward bot. And you may be saying something like, for a lot of ML practitioners, that is just not the conception. When they think of AI, that is just not what they see.
Yeah. So I think like maybe there are two things here. The first thing is people believe that, okay, like we don't actually have these kinds of AIs, or maybe like trying to build these kinds of AIs is unimaginable. But the second thing might just be, okay, they might believe that it's possible to build these AIs, but this is like way too far off, right? And this is where I think the objection to long-termism comes in. And where I think like, I don't know, it's been sort of complicated with AI safety and long-termism. Maybe like 20 years ago, like long-termism was a stronger argument for AI safety. But I think now, because of timelines, it seems that we don't really need long-termism to make like the argument that we should care about AI safety. And it like made
10 years.
I mean, maybe we just shouldn't talk about long-termism, right? If it turns like people in certain communities off. Yeah, because I think the response that I get whenever I bring up like AI safety or anything related to long-termism is, oh, okay, well, like this might be true, but AI is already causing harm today, so we should focus on immediate harms, right? And like I don't think this argument like really makes that much sense, and I'm not sure that the people expressing this argument like are actually expressing this argument. It seems like they're expressing another objection, but it seems easier to say that like we don't care about these harms because they're not immediate, right? Whereas if you look at the history of say like climate change was like totally a speculative thing in like the 1900s, right? And it's only through like decades or like maybe a century of like gradually building up evidence that we like now we have like this consensus. We don't think it's a speculative thing, right? But even in like I think like the 50s or something, don't quote me on this, but like there's like definitely a history of like climate change, like books and articles out there. Like in like the 50s, we're still like, oh, like we're not really sure still about the greenhouse effect, right? But like based, I guess, on like my preferred decision theory, it'd be like, well, like we're not sure, but it could be pretty bad. We pump all the CO2 in the atmosphere, right? How about we work on some mitigations like right now in the 50s? just in case like this might actually be a very hard problem to figure out, and like it actually is, right? Not even just like technically speaking, but like on a coordination basis. How do we actually get everybody together? So it's worth it starting early, I think, in the case of climate change, and it seems like it's also the case with AI safety.
So do you think that so I think you actually pointed something that at least I felt that I think a lot of the AI safety people are very happy to get like Pascal mode in this sense. Like I think this was my original motivation. I was like, well, like maybe it'll be fine, and maybe, like this is all a bit uncertain, but maybe it's not, and it seems like it's really impactful. Do you think you have to accept some level of like of this reasoning, some level of like, oh, I don't know if it'll be good or bad, I don't know what's going to happen, but I should work on it because it's going to be impactful to work on AI safety? Or like, how do you see that changing at the moment?
Depends on how doomy you are. Yeah, I think personally for me, it is like sort of a gamble. I mean, I'm like, yeah, I mean, even if we don't sort of get like the classical agenty like AGI, I think things like are still going to be so wild with really good AI systems. They're like going to be like so many complicated societal feedback loops that we need to think about. Like multipolar world seems like more and more likely, right? With all these AI startups, what kind of things do we have there? Like conflict now seems like a much more important thing to worry about. So it's definitely like a gamble, but I don't think it's like a bad gamble to work on like the space of preventing negative consequences from AI generally.
So I have some model that and I think this is currently happening, the field's going to change a lot. Like, you have these big models coming out. GPT-4 is rumored to be quite good.
When they release it,
when they finally start teasing releasing.
I keep saying next week, every week.
Every week, bro. It's been probably a week, yeah. Who knows what the gossip's at the moment.
Yeah.
But yeah, and like I could have definitely imagined a world where in like 3 to 4 years, I often say something like 2% of the American US population, adult population, is in love with the multimodal model. AI porn TikTok is causing massive decreases in GDP.
Maybe, right?
You kind of like tell whether you have like several online personas that are fully automated. It's kind of hard to tell like what's going on. Let's say 1 to 2 years. Let's say
yeah, at least.
let's say. And in these worlds where like your medium person is like, what is going on? And it's like, this is pretty crazy. It feels like this calculus like changes a bit. Like you no longer need to be kind of risk averse or kind of like heavily convinced by abstract arguments about, the V&M axiom to think that AI might be dangerous. In that set, like A, how do you feel about this model? And B, how does it like affect safety in general, and in particular you as someone who worries about convincing people of the dangers?
Yeah, I have a lot of uncertainty about this. So I think on one hand, it could be like good in the sense that, okay, if everybody with their like Stable Diffusion like 6, right, and GPT like 10, they're like, okay, I look out at the world today, what is the labor I can do? Nothing. I think that's a pretty wild world, in a world in which people think, damn, like these AI things, like maybe we should maybe we should regulate them, right? So I think this is good to, like, I guess, make AI capabilities sort of be known in the public. I'm not sure this is enough though, because I think if people are just aware of systems like Stable Diffusion, and like really good text generation systems, like the two things that are missing, I think, are like the difficulty of alignment, and number two, like generality, like having an agent, right? So like I think having an agent concern really motivates a lot of X risk. Like I think that is like in some sense trying to do something that is counter to your aims, or like, you know, pursuing an instrumental goal that is counter to your aim. That seems like it'd be really bad. I'm not sure like we're able to impart that understanding just from like really good generative models. Number two is like the difficulty of alignment. Like I think you know, like you're somebody in like 2035, you know, you've like finished high school, you finished university, now like you don't have a job, you'll never have a job ever again, right? Like who do you blame for this? I'm not sure you blame like the lack of alignment techniques. I think you blame the corporations, right? Or you blame the entire system that has gotten us to this point, right? Like we've created a world in which, okay, there is like no UBI, there's no other social safety net, which have these corporations like making money. So now like you're stuck in this state of precarity. Like I don't think you care about existential safety necessarily. Like, is this worse than the world we're in now? In terms of like getting people to care about X safety, I'm really not sure.
Okay. You kind of see this as an like a slightly orthogonal to the agency X risky thing, that which needs to be solved as well.
Yeah, I guess to say more like, I mean, I think we need to solve like almost generalization stuff, right? And like, you know, a specification of good rewards. But like, in my mind, like if we have these really capable like generative models, people when interacting with them, they're gonna be like, oh, you know, like, haven't we solved these things already? You know, like when I say like generate me like really good 3D porn, like think that's amazing 3D porn, right? So I mean, I think they might be like, oh, like what is even alignment? Like they just do exactly as I ask, right?
And you may see like, would it be fair to say that you see evals in such a world then causing people to focus more on the X risky agency outcomes?
Possibly, yep. So I think I see evals as like, in general, work just like adding layers of security. So okay, maybe this is enough to get people on the AI safety train, right? But we don't know. It seems like we should be trying as hard as possible to get people on the like AI is like ridiculous train.
Okay, so it's less of like a defense in depth. It's another thing that someone should be doing, and you've decided that as part of the wider strategic picture, evals are like some important part.
Yeah, maybe some people call this a portfolio approach. I call this I'm like a naturally, very uncertain person approach. I want to cover all of my bases just in case some things fail.
Do you? Okay, so maybe a wider question.
Wide.
So you kind of spoken about this idea that evals are some smaller part of a wider portfolio of alignment, and that because of your own uncertainty, you're kind of working on this. It seems like robustly good. What do you see as like some other promising directions in this space? Like when you're like, if you found out, if you got transported to 2040, Paul Cristiano is like, you bump into Paul and Paul's just celebrating. He's like, man, we've done it. It's happened. Alignment is soul. Like, and you look out and, the light cone is smiling and joyous.
That's so wide.
Yeah. It's like, wow, what happened? Obviously, apart from the evals, obviously the evals.
Evals, yeah, for sure. I'm picking up some prizes on the way.
Yeah. What work did the evals trigger? Let's say. Maybe it's a better question.
So, yeah, maybe to answer your first question, what am I optimistic about? Not a lot right now, because I think alignment is really hard and we don't have much time, less than 10 years, to solve it, either on a coordination basis, by getting people to not build AGI, or like on a technical basis, like actually formulating and operationalizing the problem and like developing a nice proof, right? I do think, eventually we will have to do something like agent foundations to really understand, like, what are these things like optimization and agency? like what are values, right? How do we actually load them into agents? What are we even doing? Right now, it seems we're sort of poking around in the dark, with like deep learning and RLHF, and it's like, okay, on these data sets, it seems to work out fine. We're not really sure if it's going to work on like other data sets. We're not really sure how to define like agency in terms of our deep learning systems, right? So it's kind of like I definitely think we still should be doing alignment of deep learning, but like it's a bet, and it might not work out.
Do you think? So if we need something like Agent Foundation, it seems that we would need like some kind of restructuring of the research, or we would need like much more people pouring into these directions. And in general, I'm not sure if the eval work, let's say convincing like DeepMind, Anthropic or something, which is like I think the framing you've given, is going to help with that. Maybe.
Yeah. So I don't think it's going to help get people into agent foundations. I think it's more about, okay, let's get people to care about AI safety in general. That's it.
That's it. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think like there's like the agent foundations people, I think, or maybe the community in general could definitely do much better job of like saying why agent foundation is important, saying why, this alignment stuff is actually really, really hard. It's just right now just a bunch of like less wrong in alignment forum posts, or you talk to people in the community, right? But the community from the outside might seem a little like off-putting to approach. So maybe we don't want to do that.
So you're sounding, you've mentioned a few times this conversation, that this whole 10 years has been thrown out. Alignment is hard has been thrown out. I guess I might as well ask the famed question, or the famed pair of questions. What is timelines and PDOOM?
PDOOM. So yeah, I think did this calculation yesterday or a few days ago with a bunch of friends. Something like 46%. It's quite high, I think, but could be higher. Timelines, yeah. I mean, I feel like a lot of my timeline stuff is like part of it is anchoring off of things like the bioanchors report. Another part of it is just like vibes. 2012 ImageNet. I was like pretty cool when it wasn't like that great, but now it's like GPT. I mean, the GPT was like a couple of years ago, right? Like GPT-4, like maybe next week, right? It's like, damn. We went from like okay image classification to a system that's like actually able to like do tasks in the world. I mean, you look at VPT, right? Like OpenAI certainly wasn't throwing all of its resources into VPT.
Do you know what VPT is?
Yeah, the video pre-trained transformer. So there's this recent paper from OpenAI where they pre-trained a transformer on a bunch of Minecraft YouTube videos, did some RLHF, and see how it did in Minecraft. So of course it's like not at human level, right? I think it was like a 1 billion parameter model or something less like that. So certainly like they could have thrown a lot more resources at this. But still it seemed to do sort of reasonable. It even was able to construct a diamond pickaxe, which is like very, very hard to do in Minecraft. You also have things like Gato, which is like a transformer pre-trained on like a bunch of RL things, RL environments, and it seems to be able to like do a bunch of tasks, So we have like really, really good capability in like certain domains. We have like, increasing generality, right? I think you just need to put these two together, scale things up a little bit more, maybe add some more hacks and tricks. And it seems like we're sort of there to something that is like an AGI-like system, or at the very least could cause a lot of damage in the world.
How do you see the rest of the world looking then? Like if you have like, you think we're quite close, like upon deployment of the system, do you seek like, I think it's like an issue I sometimes have, the question of what's your timelines, because I'm not like, I think it very much posits some idea that like, your timelines are 10 years, it means, 10 years and 1 day from now, you might as well just retire. It's, that shit's like gone, right? But in my head, like, the game still keeps going, right? So like like, let's say you get one of these, video pre-trained on YouTube, behavior clone, which is software, pre-trained, RLH left, action transformed systems in, like, let's say 10 years, and it's deployed. How do you see the world looking? What is actually the worry here? Like, what's like, do you think we're still in the game? Like, when you say time of 10 years, you're like, we got 10 years and that's it. Like, yeah, what's the vibes?
So maybe two things to distinguish are like, what is the point at which we get an AGI or an APS AI, like advanced planning, strategically aware, like with key capabilities like hacking or manipulation AI? So yeah, I think my 10 years would be like for that. Then the separate question is, okay, we have such an AI. Would it actually do something bad? I think this is the open question. I really don't know. This depends on, okay, like, what was the pre-training data? What do we know about generalization at deep learning at this point? Like, how much do you actually have to prompt a model to do bad things for it to actually do bad things? Like, how bad of a problem really is, instrumental goals with like these sorts of simulators that it's unclear. I think we might still be in the game for a while. But, it's this sort of notion of precarity, I think. Like, even if a model doesn't do something bad, it still might, right? So I think in this time, we really have to, like, rush after we deploy this first model to like, either solve alignment through something like agent foundations or produce convincing enough evidence to the world that we actually cannot solve this. We need to coordinate, not to build certain types of systems.
I mean, yeah, I guess
alignment is like a public,
yeah,
benefits everybody, but like, on the margin, a company like DeepMind has incentive to just like move forward.
Yeah, I definitely think I guess I might just be pessimistic. Coordination, like in some abstract general sense. I think people have tried to do this for a long time. It seems to just be like a thing that I think there's like in my head, a lot of smart people that have wanted to make the world more coordinated for a long time, and it just hasn't really happened.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think I'm definitely more patient between the kind of like benevolent, like, like DeepMind. I think something that really allows me in the safety community is this kind of like villainization, like places like DeepMind or OpenAI, like explicit, like talking about, like, let's say Sam Altman or something. Like, these people are like caring, nice, genuine, intelligent, future caring people. Dennis as well, right? I do have some like pretty good hope that coordination there is very much possible.
I think maybe this is kind of naive, but we're all in this together. I think these are just people at the end of the day. Maybe we can't get them, but we gotta try till the last moment, right? Like, this problem is so important. It'd be a shame if it just so happened we were in a world in which coordination would have actually worked, but we just didn't try. How embarrassing would that be?
The dignity.
Yeah, I don't know. So I think it totally makes sense to be pessimistic about like solving all of this, about coordination, about alignment, about like any other stuff that could like go wrong, like S risk. Like, I think it totally makes sense, and like I definitely don't want to like judge anybody that has just like decided not to work on any of this because it's too depressing. Like, that's totally fair. This is like super hard. But I guess personally, my perspective is like, okay, maybe this just comes from me having a lot of uncertainty about a lot of things in my life. So, on the off chance that like we could actually make a difference, it seems worth it to try. Even if sort of maybe the objective belief is that, okay, like maybe it's not worth trying. If we actually did the EVs.
I mean, I think this is the extreme dealer, I guess Yud particular makes this point where he says like both an expectation, or he makes the point that in expectation the focus should be something like this. Do like do the thing that seems like the most dignified or something like this.
Yeah, what does that mean actually?
guess he's just saying, he's trying to make the point that, like, because in his worldview, he's like, a several nines dead, probably like not that far away, and he makes the point that, like, yeah, like when you're acting in the face of like trying to increase such small probabilities, or acting in the face of causing a problem that seems so hard, you shouldn't follow the heuristic of like, what should I do to solve it? Because everything seems doomed to you. You should be like, what's the most dignified way? It'd be more dignified if like OpenAI and DeepMind at least did some coordination before like some other company went and built AGI. It'd be more dignified if like we really tried to scale mechanistic interpretability, or had like at least had evals had some warning before it happened. And he claims that it's like a more robust heuristic and also more motivating for oneself.
Oh, so his argument is like, dignity isn't the thing we inherently care about. It's like this heuristic that actually gets us to like reduce risk.
Yeah, he's like, particularly for him, like a proper dude, he's like, oh, like, the framing shouldn't be, is this going to solve alignment? Because nothing is. The framing is like, is this a more dignified world?
Interesting.
And that's kind of like he approached the problem. He said it like a lot more. He didn't phrase it as nicely as that, but I think this is his general point, which I think if you're Yud makes sense. Also, I think I have some terminal like value on humanity. Like, I'd rather like try than like at least have tried.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Even when you know it's hopeless, we just keep on trying.
Yeah.
That's what we do.
I mean, I don't think. I mean, I'm not that much. Apply that much to me. But it's interesting.
Imagine if we did solve it.
Right.
That'd be absolutely sick.
Oh, here's a question, Alan. So you're talking about you care about the kind of fairness stuff, justice stuff. I think obviously people right now, the harms that are being done, I want them to slow down. We also need to make some implication that even as a cold-hearted, long-term future-caring utilitarian, you should care about this because these things might be locked in. Like the society in the future might be locked in. I think I have some intuition. I'm not sure, but at least I think a fair kind of pushback against this is the idea that like there's just not that much time where society looks like it does now. Like what you get is a kind of AGI thing, and you get like self-improvement for a bit, and at some point you just have like a super intelligent god, and like whatever that thing is doing or whatever that thing wants to do is what decides what the society looks like, not necessarily like the current dynamics or like those dynamics like pushed into the future. How do you feel about that as a state?
I think this is a possibility, but again, I have a lot of uncertainty about whether this will actually happen. Like, I think, yeah, so maybe the thing that you're saying is, okay, we have this like super intelligent AGI. It's like somehow figured out like what are the true human values that like everybody cares, and like it makes sure everything is okay, or at least like gives us time to figure out all these human values, right? Yeah, like I think that'd be great. I'm not sure this is actually going to happen. Right? Like one is like, is CEV even possible? Number two, okay, like suppose OpenAI has built the AGI, like what do they do with it? I think like the temptation to do something to instantiate, your own values is just way, way too strong. If you actually have a god at your hands. Number two, I mean, even if they like try not to do anything with it, like I think for sure other parties are going to want that kind of power too. The US government, China, maybe even other companies, right? What happens when there's conflict? What does OpenAI do? Do they just obliterate other entities? That's like wild, right? If they did, I think for sure, like general populace would be like, what the fuck is going on with OpenAI? Like maybe we should go to war with this, right? This doesn't seem like a good future either. So I think there are just a lot of factors that like maybe we actually do need to figure out right now. Like what is the game plan when we have AGI to ensure that like we get that kind of future where we have the time to think about, okay, like what are things we actually want and we have the luxury, to work on, okay, like let's eliminate resource scarcity, right? Let's try to eliminate discrimination somehow, like maybe not with the AGI, but like because we don't have other problems, we can more focus our like time and energy on like these social problems.
Yeah, so as you statement there, like something like you still see societal dynamics affecting the long-term future, even in the face of like incredibly advanced, powerful systems. You think there are actions, like, everything still changes based on what wider society looks like as well.
Yeah. So this also depends on the kind of AGI we have. So I think on the one hand, like suppose that this AGI is in some sense value free or value neutral. Okay, then like it's going to be aligned. Okay, suppose we solve alignment, right? Then it's going to be aligned with like whoever's controlling it. Like, okay, if it's like OpenAI, then you run into the problems that like I talked about, right? Like conflict or just like, some sort of dictatorship or something. Okay, suppose that actually, in the meantime, like we sort of solve parts of like moral philosophy. So now like this AGI actually has like reasonable values that, like the vast majority of humanity would agree with, right? And even if, its overseers thinks it should do something, it actually doesn't because it knows better in some sense. Okay, like I think this seems like sort of reasonable, right? But the difficulty is I don't think anybody's really working on this in the AI safety community of figuring out like, what do we do like about different moral systems, for instance? Like what is the answer to moral uncertainty? Is it like moral parliaments? Is it like something else? So like it seems that on the first path, I don't know, conflict seems like pretty bad. On the second path, well, we haven't really done much work towards this. So I'm not very like, I think I'm not very like optimistic about, the world like going well, even if we solve alignment yet. Somebody should work on this though.
What's your biggest frustrations with the AI safety community?
Biggest frustrations? Damn, might get canceled for saying these.
Second channel, don't worry.
Yeah, frustrations.
Michael's definitely going to tweet this. Sorry, let me ask the question again. Sorry. What are your biggest frustrations with the AI safety community?
Frustrations. AI safety community frustration.
Oh, well, what is AI safety? Okay. Alan, in your opinion...
Max.
Right, let's go again. Alan, in your opinion, what is AI safety?
I think there's a broad version of this term, maybe several broad versions of this term, and several narrow versions. So I think the narrow version, of course, is like, of course, meaning between us, AI existential safety. So how do you prevent AI from being an existential risk to people, whether it's through empowerment or human extinction or something else? There's like broader versions of AI safety too that include more than existential risk. So you might include S risks, which care a lot about like suffering caused by artificial intelligence, either through conflict or like something else. And I think there's an even broader notion of AI safety, which like, in my mind, this is the ideal definition of AI safety, and it encompasses like literally everything, right? Like we care about like all the negative consequences from AI, and we try to draw the threads like between all of these phenomena we're observing and like core technical and social problems. So this includes things like the things that people study in fairness, right? Like AIs that like aren't really able to like learn what our fairness, what our fairness judgments are. AI that like just exacerbate discrimination that is already present in society and that is present in data sets that we use to train these AIs. So I think that's like that broad definition to me is the ideal definition, the one we can all get behind, so that we can do things that we practically agree on, like more regulation, slowing down AI development, more like verification of AI systems before we deploy them.
Okay, given that definition, and maybe focusing on the narrow AI safety X risk definition. what's your biggest frustration with the community or the set of people currently works on, insofar that they are able to be homogenized? Maybe you should like go into more specific subsets of this community. But yeah, the people that worry about the extra say.
So I haven't actually been doing this for that long. I think I've been doing or I guess I've been considering myself a part of this community for like maybe a year and a half, 2 years-ish. So like basically just for my PhD. Um, yeah. So I mean, in this short amount of time, I think it's been like pretty great so far, just finding people who care about the same things that I do and are motivated to work similarly. I think this is definitely like a big like anti-frustration, I guess. It's like I think it's very frustrating working on something like by yourself, and like thinking you're the only person around who cares about the problem, and everybody else thinks you're on the crazy train or something. Um, yeah, maybe one frustration though is I think it'd be like a lot better if more people in the AI X safety community were like more explicitly wanting to build bridges to other communities that also care about safety in like the broad sense. So in particular, in like to the like fairness and like ethics, just because I think coordination is a super important thing for us to be doing. It might even be a low hanging fruit to like slow down AI development and make sure we don't like face negative consequences. Yeah, I guess that'd be the main thing for me.
Do you see this community changing a lot? Like, let's say, by this community, let's say the set of people that if you ask them, what do you do? They would say something along the lines of I work to ensure that extras from AI. Do you see like that set of people changing a lot in the next few years?
I think more people are gonna get on the train, the same train as we are on right now. Yeah, AI is being deployed much more. These like ridiculous generative models, right? It's like wild when you're put out of a job by an AI in like 2025, but then maybe we predicted 2060, right? So this is a good thing. I guess I hope that like, in getting more people on this train, we also make sure that we repair the bridges that don't exist or have been burned between the different safety communities. Not sure how this is going to happen, but I think a good first step is just talking to people, going to the places that they frequent. Like, I think definitely some AI safety people, like AI X safety people, should just go to like FACT, like the biggest conference in Paris that's held yearly, and just like talk to people about concerns. We should like submit papers there. We should like actually try to understand what like FACT people are saying. Like do some social theory, like study some psychology. Like really think about like how AIs are going to interact with society. Like maybe as well, we should try to develop like some sort of, point of view that is not just techno-optimist. Like, even if we solve a line, what are the problems that are left?
How similar do you think the technical problems are between fairness community?
Somewhat similar. So I think one particular technical problem in fairness is so in a particular context, let's say, I don't know, like hiring in this particular country with this particular historical context, what do we do? Like, what are the conceptions of fairness that are at play? Can we like learn these things and formalize them in a certain way so that we can actually try to understand what's going on and come to consensus about what we're doing? I think the techniques that we're coming up with in AI safety are like super relevant for this, right? Like if we do RLHF to actually learn people's preferences, then we like study the reward function. I think that might give us valuable insight actually about what people actually think about in fairness. I think general stuff too, like, anytime we think about generalization problems in AI safety, these are also relevant in fairness because like fairness problems aren't just like one shot, like the train test distribution are like going to be the same, right? Things are changing in the real world as well. So totally, I think that thing is also relevant. Another thing is just like all this stuff about like instrumental goals and like reinforcement learning systems and agents, right? Like if we're going to be deploying like algorithms in society that make consequential decisions about people's welfare, well, these are going to be decisions that are going to be made over time. And in making decisions over time, like we don't want like the AI systems we're deploying to like do really weird things, have really weird instrumental goals. So I think the connection to me seems like pretty clear, but it hasn't been communicated well, which is pretty unfortunate.
You have a Center of Long-Term Risk hoodie on.
I do. The size too small, I think.
I think so. I think so as well. Well played. What's this whole asterisk thing?
S risks. Okay. Well, to learn.
Sure. What's this whole X risk, S risk, C risk?
So I'm not sure what C risk is, but
it's catastrophic.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Right.
those things.
Yeah. So X risk is existential risk. I think of this as problems that would either result in human extinction or in like the lost capacity of humans to like do things in the future. And maybe like when I say things, I mean great things. Maybe when I think about great things, it's like somewhat valuable. I mean, I think it'd be pretty cool. We like travel to the stars, like, we see another species who try to help. I don't know. There seems to be a lot of things like we could do in the universe, like improve our understanding, like really just go through and review our history and try to become like better agents, right? All of this becomes impossible if like we're extinct or if like we are trapped on like a planet that has had all the resources depleted. So that to me is an existential risk. An S risk is a suffering risk. So these are things that could cause like really, really like lots of suffering in the world. So what are some examples of things that cause a lot of suffering today? Factory farming, arguably. It's like absolutely terrible how we treat our animals today. What are other things that could cause a lot of suffering? Dictatorships, yeah. Malevolence is one. Yeah, so yes, so I guess like there's some more mundane things, and there are things that are a bit more like hypothetical but seem like they could happen given the technologies that we're developing right now. Yes, the mundane things, there's factory farming. I think there's also just like wars, like whenever, so not just like the death tolls in wars themselves, but like what war brings with it, right? So like just disease, like malnutrition, like general instability, right? That seems to have caused like a huge amount of suffering in history. So that's sort of like the more mundane things. I mean mundane. I mean it's like they're still pretty bad. The things that we already know. There are things that like maybe we don't have yet, like we could have. So hypothetically, if we like manage to become a galaxy-faring civilization and we spread factory farming to the stars, like trillions and trillions of animals are suffering in factory farms. Just like seems horrific, right? Another thing is, okay, like suppose that we have really, really good AI systems that like control large portions of like the Earth's resources, like the solar system's resources, the galaxy's resources. Well, if they engage in conflict like wars, that also seems really, really bad. Like our wars multiplied by like 1 million or something, right? So I'm working S-risk just to like really map out what are the causes of suffering and what are the ways we can like how can we act to reduce them. So I think like one difference between X risk and S risk is like sort of where you start from in terms of like what you care about in your moral theories. Like people in S risk really, really care about suffering, and I would say they prioritize this to like differing extents over pleasure. So like, between like if you have equivalent amounts of suffering and like pleasure, you would definitely like prefer reducing the suffering more by like 1 unit than like increasing somebody's pleasure or like, happiness by another unit.
And insofar you can speak for the Centre for Long-Term Risk.
I cannot
speak. Too many of us.
I mean, I was just an intern. I don't work there as a full-time employee.
where do you think your views differ the most from the mainstream AI safety research?
I think suffering is important. I think cooperation is pretty important work. Yeah, so I mean, I think this has been a common answer. I have a lot of uncertainty about this. I think I'm still in the process of figuring this out because like S risks are still like kind of new to me. Yeah, I guess what I differ the most is I care about cooperation. I think it's important to get this work done. Like,
What do you mean by corporations?
yeah, so cooperation meaning, suppose you have two agents, like they're in some sort of game. How do you make sure that the outcome is actually a Pareto optimal outcome? So for example, if you're both playing a game of chicken, right? How do you make sure you don't like crash into each other and like cause like astronomical loss? Because like maybe like your one nation, like maybe one agent is like, this nation that has a nuclear stockpile, and like this other agent is like another nation that has a nuclear stockpile, and like these two nations together are like the entire Earth. They have huge empires. A game of chicken is like, okay, like you both launch nukes at each other because you've gone to the brink. We definitely don't want that kind of thing happen.
So, Alan, I think a lot of us, we brought you here to find about your origin stories.
Origin stories.
Yeah. How did Mr. Alan Chan come to wear the hoodie, the Center Long-Term Risk, come to call himself an AI safety researcher?
Well, I just like took this hoodie from the CLR office.
Okay. But the other bit.
The other bit. Okay. Yeah. Where should I begin? How far back?
I think, you know what? I want to hear from from birth.
September 1st, 1996.
Yeah.
Probably at night, probably 12 a.m. or something. Okay. I was born in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, to two parents, immigrants, Vietnam. So, yeah. How much detail?
Just, whatever's necessary to understand, to live it as if we're in your shoes.
Yeah, so I don't know. Why do I work on AI safety? So I think part of it is, why do I work on things that could go wrong, I guess? I don't know.
No, I'm wanting the story. It's play by play. What made from let's say starting you
Yeah.
to sitting down here. What happened?
Yeah. Okay, so I think there's like a little bit more to this though than the undergrad.
Okay.
I think this also depends on how I ended up developing my moral motivations. Like, why didn't I just like go and be like an investment banker, right? And like literally just like a regular investment banker, like none of that earned again stuff. Yeah, I mean, I think like part of it is my upbringing. Like I think like my family is like pretty Buddhist. They care, and in Buddhism you care a lot about reducing the suffering in the world. Particularly, my mother cares a lot about Buddhism and reducing suffering. So I think just growing up in an environment like made me care about these things as well. And to the extent that I saw like suffering in the world, whether it was like on the news or like interpersonally, that seemed like a really bad thing. So I think that's like one part of it. Another part is just like being exposed to like the things that I think make life really worth living, like just like hanging out with your friends, like doing fun things, trying new foods, traveling. So I think like both the upside and the downside that like I was able to experience in my life, like I think made me believe that, okay, it seems like really important to make sure that to like remove the downsides for as many people as we can, and to make sure that like people can actually, experience the upside in life. So I think that's like general motivation, I guess, for like working on social causes or causes to like reduce risk in like some very, very general sense, right? So I think I spent a lot of time doing a lot of searching and thinking for like what sorts of things I could work on. I like tried out a bunch of volunteering for various causes in like high school and university just to see like what things might be interesting for me. I think this was good to the extent that like, I learned a lot more about like things that are wrong in the world. I got really into social justice. And like, I think like, how did I get into AI safety? it was kind of in my like latter part of my undergraduate, like going to my master's. So I did a math degree during my undergraduate. I did a math degree mostly because I didn't really know what exactly I wanted to do. Math just seemed like a robustly good thing, and gave me the flexibility to take a lot of other things that I was also really interested in, like linguistics and like political science, and like also do a lot of debate, where I talked about like a bunch of this stuff too. So yeah, I guess like having a diverse range of interests made it really hard to focus in on a particular thing. Like I just want, I mean, I think I still want to during my PhD, just like try a bunch of different things. And like maybe this is a difficulty in like getting concrete projects out. So yeah, at the end of my bachelor's degree, I was like, well, what do I do now with a math degree? Like nothing I've tried has been super, super convincing to me. I don't really want to be a mathematician. Like it was like nice, but it seems like being a pure mathematician doesn't really have like a lot of impact in like the near or like medium term future, and it seems like there are more important problems than like being a pure mathematician, and more important problems to work on, like climate change, right, or like global health. So then I started thinking, okay, so what are the things that could like really, really make the world turn out bad, or like could have like a really big impact on the world in like my lifetime, say, right? So AI, I think, happened to be one of those things that I was thinking about. So I thought, okay, like maybe I should go into AI. So I spent like about a year just like reading a lot about this and thinking, okay, like where is AI going? Like, why do I think that it's like could actually be like a really big thing, right? So I think solidifying those intuitions took like a year. And at this point, I was like doing a master's. That it wasn't like the ideal master's, but I later like switched advisors, and like it was a lot better for me. So yeah, I, like in the middle of my master's, I like switched to doing like AI. Like started off with reinforcement learning, and it was like really fun, and I really enjoyed the environment that I was put in. Just like having people who like cared also about AI, and also who also thought that could be a really big thing. But in the course of my master's, I guess I thought, okay, this is like a reinforcement learning lab. So I was at the University of Alberta. This is a reinforcement learning lab. These people like actually want to build AGI. I don't know, like this seems kind of concerning to me. Like I had this intuition, like okay, like oh, what the fuck though? Like an artificial general intelligence, like you could do some bad things maybe. Yeah, so this was like, I think, I finished my master's in 2020. So I guess in the middle of COVID, I was sort of thinking, like trying to grapple with these questions. Also, like just like noticing, or just like living through, like COVID, and also like the George Floyd protests, right? I was like, okay, like, real shit like actually happened to the world. I'm like living through history, right? So like maybe something wild could like actually happen, like, and something I'm like personally involved in, like every day, like in like AI, right? So I started to read a lot more about AI safety, so like super intelligence and stuff, like a little bit of alignment form and less wrong. And, I remember I was like reading super intelligence, and I was like, damn, like this is true. Like shit, is somebody working on this? Then I thought, well, like maybe I should work on this, right? And I think like having that feeling that like wow, like this is a thing I should work on was a pretty like life-changing moment. Because I think like before, I guess like 2019-ish, when you like learn about history in school, it's sort of like, okay, like these things happened to these people, right? And like, damn, like we have the world we have today. But to some extent, you feel sort of this distance from what happened. Like these people are so far removed, how can you ever relate to them, right? But like, we're living through history right now. We lived through a pandemic. We're living through like an increase in geopolitical tensions, right? We're living through like a lot of really concerning developments in artificial intelligence. Well, like we're living through history, that means we can affect it, right? So I think like that moment, maybe it was more like a gradual development, made me think that I could actually do something about this problem. So, I applied for PhD programs. I didn't apply for AI safety though. I was still sort of unsure whether I wanted to like fully devote all my time to this, but I got into a PhD program at Mila. I started like doing research, but like basically immediately I like really tried hard to like shift my research from reinforcement learning to doing AI safety. It took a while, and I think like I'm still sort of learning how to like do AI safety research well and figuring out what the most valuable thing to do is. But I think yeah, it's been going pretty well, and I'm really glad I make that decision to switch.
Nice. And right this second, what you're working on?
What I'm working on, so I'm trying to finish up a paper with CLR. We are trying to evaluate the cooperativity of language models. So the really interesting thing I think is okay, you can construct a data set, get people to write scenarios for you if you want, but we actually want our ability to generate evaluations to scale with the capabilities of our models. So we're getting language models to generate scenarios for us that basically scenarios that involve some cooperation, and seeing what language models do in these kinds of scenarios. That's the first thing I'm working on. I also have just a bunch of other projects right now that are in varying stages of completion or feasibility. One thing I'm really interested in is how are we actually able to show people that models are actually actually much more capable than might be claimed by some people. Yeah. So another thing I'm working on is this sort of general, almost like position paper / survey paper on speculative concerns in AI safety. It's essentially going to be an argument that it's important to speculate for cause areas. And review sort of, okay, what are the methodologies and the ways in which people have speculated in AI safety? What has worked out? What hasn't? And why do we still need to continue on coming up with things that might appear more speculative to modern machine learning communities, but are actually important, I think, in pointing out possible problems we might face.
Is this aimed at machine learning? This position paper?
Yeah, so it's aimed at the academic machine learning community. I think a lot of parts of what I want to do are sort of more aimed at, okay, how can we field build or build bridges effectively by either connecting our concerns to concerns that other people have, or by just saying things in language that other people can more understand.
Nice. I don't know. Sure what else I got, Mr. Allen. This is quite.
What?
Okay, tell about it. Tell about it.
I'm fine.
Yeah.
I think I really done it.
I feel like I might have to. Maybe they see some competition in this.
That's sense.
Turn down the monopoly. I compete. Good fight. Put my money where my mouth is. Yes, good vibes.